Very good. So happy evening to folks joining from uh, India as well as to other countries. There are a few who joined from Singapore, Gulf, and some even joined from US and Canada. A very happy evening to Karthik, our expert speaker for the evening on GCCs. The topic for today, the rise of global capability centers in India, the current spotlight in the landscape, capabilities, best practices, and key imperatives. So it's going to be a very, very interesting session. See, of late, GCCs are coming into prominence, right? They were small sections here and there, but today they are a big force. And it is important for us to see why and how they are important and what are the challenges. There is also the other side in terms of people talking about challenges to the existing IT services companies. All those we will discuss as we move on. Today's hot topic, if you see the Times of India, the news is AstraZeneca. They're expanding their current Technology and Innovation Center in Chennai from some 3 lakh square feet to, 340,000 square feet to 500,000 square feet, adding a whole lot of people, investing about 250 crore. This is the hot topic in today's news. No. So why GCCs are becoming a important reckoning now? Because India has over 1,400 GCCs, right? This number has doubled, from 2015 in a matter of less than 9 years. It has doubled. The rate at which this is growing, even we may be doubling from here, even in four years. That is how it looks like. The employee base, about 13 lakh people are employed in GCCs. And there's also a good FDI for the country, right? Inflows. The revenue contribution to exports also increases because of GCCs. And there are multiple industries which are creating these GCCs. There's not only technology is the focus, finance, healthcare, retail, manufacturing. There have been a spectrum of industries which are creating these GCCs. And the innovation and R&D, the patent filing, we have moved on from, let's say, back office GCCs to one of innovation, R&D, and competitive advantage. And the major locations for GCCs, starting with Chennai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, and even now tier 2 cities also they are moving, right? Chennai obviously is a major hub. There are more than 100 GCCs in Chennai itself. Apart from AstraZeneca, Citibank, Ford, Accenture, there are a multiple number of GCCs. So if you look at the benefit of GCCs, they provide job creation, skill development, economic development, boost to the IT sector, and it also helps in enhanced global integration, right? So the moment GCCs come in, more number of people start interacting with globally, and there is a cultural bonding and things like that. Also increased revenue, improved standard of living. They also support a number of startups in innovation. So I think overall a whole lot of positives from the GCCs, but they also introduce competitive pressure for the IT and BPM companies. And they also offer substantial opportunities for growth, collaboration, as well as skills. So there are people now started talking about hey, my account is closing in US or UK or someplace, because they are creating their own GCCs back in India. So some of our on-site people are feeling the pinch. They are coming back to India, and some of them are offer jobs back in their offshore GCCs, things like that. We are hearing a whole lot of news around these GCCs. So all those will be, I hope, some topics of discussion for today. And if not, we can find out anyway, during the Q&A session. So coming to Spin Chennai, which is my duty to talk about a few minutes on. For those who are new, it is more than 28 years old, the Spin Chennai, one of the most active and relevant spins in the world today. Dynamic, they also call it a dynamic spin. Not only because of the impact it has been creating through the reach and the programs, but also the consistency and relevancy with the future focus. So we always, are on the topic which is relevant, which is the future. If you take AI, Gen AI, we have been doing a multiple number of sessions. So if you take ESG, we have had a number of sessions on that. Similarly, Atmanirbhar, right? How do we do it in India, right? How do we create world-class products and services from India? So there have been a whole lot of sessions focused around these. Of course, our key focus and our strength lies in the CMMI 2.0, the ISO, Six Sigma, Lean, TOC, BS 7799, GDPR, Agile, Malcolm Baldrige, Balanced Scorecard, Blue Ocean Strategy, 5S, 7QC tools, right? We can go on and on. We have consultants who are experienced in all these, who are doing assignments as we speak in various aspects of these in India, as well as even for China market, in overseas market and all that. So we identified digital transformation maturity as a very, very important theme way back. And we also look at the important dimensions for the nation. For example, the supply chain cost for India is 14% of GDP, whereas for many countries, developed countries, it is at 8%. So one of the challenge, what we look for solutions is how do we reduce the supply chain cost. So we have been engaging with a whole lot of thought leaders, not only from India, but also from abroad. Dr. Jeff Sutherland, the author of Agile and Scrum, he has been a speaker, couple of times at Spin Chennai. We have had Dr. Watts Humphrey spent close to 10 years with us. Louis Trigger of Israel, who is a key proponent of theory of constraints. Dr. Bill Curtis of CMMI, Mark Johnson, the InnoSight, the Michael Krigsman of CXO Talk. I think I can go on and on. People from Twitter, Google, Facebook, InnoSight, many of them have been part of Spin Chennai sessions to enrich our community. There are various ways to engage with Spin. I think those of you who are wanting to know, one is as a member, right? You can become a corporate or individual member by going to the website. In a matter of 2 minutes, you can become a member as corporate or as an individual by paying a small fee. As an event delegate, like you, as some of you are today, we also do training programs. So as an attendee of one of our training programs, like half-day training, one-day training, things like that, or as a contestant in one of the innovation challenges, what we do, like for example, Watts Humphrey Awards. That has been every year we have been conducting this contest across various industries, not only IT industry, BPM industry, but also across industries. You could be a faculty or a trainer, right? Or a strategic partner like the international journal IJTCE, who publish a lot of thought leadership from Spin Chennai, or as a sponsor of some of our events, uh, or as academic partner. So these are some of the ways in which you engage with us. So coming to today's expert speaker, Mr. Karthik Padmanabhan, who is a managing partner for Zinnov, Zinnov's globalization excellence practice. He oversees strategy and consulting, delivery for clients across the value chain, establishing top-tier global COEs, optimizing delivery structures, reshaping technology investments for innovation. He brings in more than 20 years of experience spanning consulting, delivery, and client-side roles. A prolific thought leader and ecosystem orchestrator. He has driven multi-million-dollar portfolios and large-scale transformations. So, very good in advisory, entrepreneurship, practice development. So his key focus areas include transformation, digital strategy, product management, digital engineering, and metaverse. Interestingly, he was recently quoted on the Business World on long-standing presence of GCCs in India. So, prior to joining Zinnov, Karthik was at Nokia Siemens, where he managed RFP processes and supplier relationship as part of global sourcing. And the last 12 years or so, he was at Cognizant in various leadership roles, and also managed Cognizant's Australia consulting arm on the digital transformation journey. So outside the office, Karthik enjoys sports, outdoor activities, and the invariable coffee catch-up. Hopefully, Karthik, we do a coffee catch-up sometime.
We certainly should, sir. We certainly should.
So without spending any more time, I would like to invite Karthik to share his thoughts. So I would like to request all of you to unmute. Right? Usually we say mute, but this time we are saying unmute and give Karthik a big applause.
Thank you so
much.
Thank you, Karthik.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So first of all, so delighted to be here. Truly delighted to be here. I think, to be honest with you, I think Spin is not new to me, and neither am I new to Spin in that sense, right? I've had long, amazing memories with the Software Process Improvement Network and Spin. It goes back. So when I think Raghav reached out, I was so pleasantly surprised. I was so pleasantly happy that I could come and be in a position to come and talk to you all. This was almost felt like a reconnection to a large degree. I think it was almost felt as if, the homecoming to also to one. So very, very delighted to be here. Thank you so much for being here. Dr. Ramzar, you set the context so well. I was sometimes wondering, do I have anything more to say in terms of how you set up the whole GCC context, right? So without taking any further time, let me launch into a few things that I do want to talk about as far as GCC is concerned, right? So let's go right ahead. Please do let me know once you're able to see my screen.
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. No, I think we use the term GCCs without necessarily introducing what it's all about. Even I think a few years ago, when somebody said GCC to me, I also thought it was Greater Chennai Corporation, right? Then I thought it was more Gulf Cooperation Council, I think it was. When the global capability centers as a phenomenon has really hit India, even though it has been there for a long time, it's in the recent past that I think all of us have really taken cognizance of the fact that GCCs are here and it's evolving rapidly, right? Before we launch into GCCs, allow me to give you a small plug about the organization that I work for. It's a company called Zinnov. Zinnov is a management consulting firm which has been around for 22 years. Our CEO, Pari Natarajan, he was probably among the first pioneers of the GCC industry. Right, he came in here 22 years ago to set up a GCC for one of his customers. Realized that there were a lot more customers who are going to set up their centers in India. We call them, it was back then very derogatorily called as captive center. Maybe that's a term that you've used earlier, but it's no longer used as a captive center anymore, right? And he realized that it's actually a global transformation center. We call it GCOE. Sometimes we call them tech hubs, right? So from that time onwards, Zinnov has been in the business of setting up GCCs, advising global capability centers, evolving them on the path of greater portfolio growth, maturity, innovation, and so on and so forth. And we have now got centers across the world. We have consulting teams back in the US. We have consulting teams in Europe. And of course, in India, wherever those GCCs are, we have presence over there. So we are located in Bangalore, Chennai, Hyderabad, Pune, NCR region. And interestingly enough, our CEO hails from a small village called Nemili, near Vellore, right? So he's also set up a research center over there, right? And he's actually set up, so what Zinnov does is a lot of benchmark work. We do a lot of data around getting benchmarks, data insights, and we also have a research center that is based out of Nemili, which is near Vellore district as well. So that's who we are. Quickly, just tell you what we do. If you have to not even look at the slide, but remember, there are 3 things that Zinnov does with respect to GCCs, and please do reach out to us if you have any of these. One is we set up GCCs, right? So we design, consult, set up GCCs, right? So if any organization wants to come to India to say, hey, we want to set up a tech center, we want to set up a shared services center, we want to set up a GBS center, we want to create a COE, right? Zinnov does it from beginning, right? From design, discovery, location analysis, organizational strategy, operating model, look at real estate, talent acquisition, HR and branding, center leader hiring, finance and accounting. So everything, we set it up from scratch for success. So we build world-class GCCs. That's number 1. Number 2, for GCCs who are already existing in India, we help them scale, grow, innovate, mature, look at how we can extract better value, look at productivity, look at efficiency, all of that. So we have a raft of consulting solutions that help GCCs in their next stage of maturity and growth for existing GCCs. Third, we actually have what we call as a GCC platform. The platform is like a membership. It's actually it's in simpler terms, it is a microsite where we put in all of our benchmarks. So you want to look at, saying, cost of operations benchmark. You want to look at talent benchmark. You look at compensation benchmark. You want to say, hey, a center head in a GCC wants to make a decision and he wants to hire people. He wants to set compensation data. It'll be there, right? You want to look at, hey, am I spending too much on my certain vendors? It'll be there. There will always be industry level benchmarks that we've researched and kept. And that's the third thing that we do. So without further ado, let's quickly run into what we have today. I'll try to keep it simple in terms of, there is a lot of content, right? And I'm sure many of you would have spoke in true Indian deck tradition. There's a number of slides, but I will try to keep it to about 30 minutes, 45 minutes. Love to have a conversation with each of you. Please drop your thoughts on chat. I'm not able to look at the chat right now, but if somebody has a question, please unmute and ask at any point of time. So you don't have to wait for the end. You can go ahead and ask the question. More than happy to take that question and have a debate around what it is, right? So no problem at all. So I'll quickly run through them. There may be slides that I'll go a little bit fast. There may be slides that I'll slow down. If you want more data, more information, if I'm going too fast, let me know, right? So I'll be guided by you in terms of how we want to run this. But first, a look at the landscape, right? What are we talking about? What is our GCCs today? Dr. Rajaram said there are 1,300 GCCs. No, actually, there are more now, right? This data in front of you says 1,600 GCCs. That's last year data. Today, another 100 GCCs have got added. Today, there are about 1,700 GCCs in India, 1,700 centers in India today, right? And some centers have multiple centers. Like, for example, you take Carlon, there's a center in Bangalore, there's a center in Hyderabad. Verizon has a center in Hyderabad, has a center in Chennai, right? Many GCCs have multiple centers, right? Nokia has multiple centers. Ericsson has multiple centers, for example. So if you combine all of them, there are almost 2,900 to 3,000 centers of GCCs that are available in India today, right? And that's actually growing at a CAGR of 60% in the last 9 years, right? From where it was to where it is now. It's running at a 60% cadence, right? That's actually running it. It has got a talent base, and now it says 1.6 million. I looked at the latest data, it is at 1.8 million, right? So 1.8 million is the workforce, which and many of you are coming from a service provider industry, right? So if you really want to compare the two, we are saying GCC industry is still growing, right? It's still growing rapidly. I think roughly 1/4, right? If you want to say 25% of the talent, right? Compared to a service provider. If you take all your service providers, your TCS, Accentures, Cognizants, Wipros, HCLs, all of them combined together, you're looking at about approximately an 8 million talent base over there. GCCs has got close to a 2 million talent base, right? So give you some extent of the size of the talent that is actually out there, right? In terms of where we are talking about. Now, very often we ask the question, right? Why is this evolution happening so fast, right? The fundamental answer to that is talent, right? The number of times we use the term talent in a day when I'm sitting around my office over here, you will not believe it, right? Every time we're only talking talent, like the fundamental reasons as to why GCCs come here originally used to be efficiency. So sometimes the quote I say is, hey, companies come to India for efficiency, they stay for talent, but now they're scaling for transformation, right? That is actually what is happening. But the name of the game here is talent, right? So they are all here for extraordinary talent that India is able to produce, right? So if you say one big reason why they are here, talent, and it's not cost, right? Cost was one massive angle earlier. But today that cost game has changed. It's mainly in terms of, hey, how do we get that kind of expertise, the kind of breadth of talent, depth of talent, domain expertise, technology expertise? It's unparalleled to the rest of the world right now, right? So that's probably what it is in terms of what is actually shifting it over here. Give me a second. If you don't mind, let me pull out, I can, at the end of the presentation, maybe pull out a slide that gives you a global view, right? Gives you a global view in terms of where is India talent compared to America talent, because we have also done that kind of analysis. Maybe if you have time, I'll pull that out for you as well. Now, if I just a few other things that I do want to talk about where they are. There was a big trend of the GCCs originally being set up in Bangalore. So if you really look at it, where are the GCCs? Who are the kind of companies who come in here? The vast majority of the GCCs here are actually from the US companies, right? The fast movers, if you really look at how it all started up, its first company, one of the first primary GCCs, we always say was Texas Instruments, right? If you remember good old times, 20, 30 years ago, Texas Instruments were there. Dr. Rajaram spoke about Citibank, which actually evolved from a service provider to a GCC. Scope and Standard Chartered Bank is still very popular in Chennai, for example, right? Walmart set up the GCCs 20 years ago, for instance, right? So a lot of those GCCs came in from the US. But now what we are seeing, if you can see the chart itself, is the growth from Americas is still very high. There's still 22% growth year over year in terms of what we're talking about from the Americas GCCs coming in here. But we are seeing much larger growth coming in from both EMEA and APAC, right? So EMEA GCC, like your Nordic side of the world, for example, so all of your Ericssons, Nokia, Siemens Networks, Novo Nordisk, for example, they have all set up big GCCs here. In your Benelux region, you have your UBS, you have Novartis, you have Pfizer and all of them. They are setting up, they have already set up GCCs here as well. And now the APAC companies are picking up, right? So a lot of GCCs coming here from Japan, right? If I go back and say, look at Mercari, for example, they have set up a GCC here. We got Raxul setting up a GCC here. So Japan is coming in big time. And we're also seeing other organizations who are coming in here and setting up their centers in India, right? So literally speaking, today, what has happened is globally, if you take any organization, right, you can go into a banking sector, insurance sector, healthcare, life sciences, retail, any of them. All organizations today have GCCs as a CEO charter, right? It is there. It's a question of what is the extent of scale, what is the extent of their ambition that they're looking for. Nobody is not thinking of a GCC. Every single organization is thinking of some form of GCC or the other. Some of them have already set it up. Some of them have set up mature centers. Some of them have said, no, let me stick with my service provider for the time being, but let's reevaluate it 1 year later. But there is nobody today that we have not spoken to, that we've spoken to, who said, hey, I'm not even thinking about a GCC. Everybody is thinking about it. It is just the scale of their maturity or the scale of their ambition that's probably is different to one center to another center. Now let's take a look at how are these GCCs sort of evolved to some degree, right? Most GCCs came in here set up as an IT GCC, right? So typically your application management, application maintenance, IT services, looking at infrastructure management and so on, right? That's how they all started off to a large degree. But or they would have started off from a BPS perspective or a BPO perspective, right? They're looking at, let's say, finance and accounting. There could be accounts receivable, accounts payable, claims management, revenue cycle management. Any of those from a BPO perspective is what they might have set it up. Quickly, the technology companies came and changed the game, right? So when I came to technology companies, I'm talking the likes of, let's say, a Microsoft, Google, Adobe, right? Meta. Those companies completely have changed the game. They came in here and they're not talking BPM, they're not talking IT, they went to the R&D, right? So today, if you look at it, a large part of your Office 365 is getting developed over here, right? Your Google Cloud is getting developed over here, right? Over here in India, for that matter. A lot of the products that you are using today, right? Your Adobe products are actually getting developed over here, for instance, right? So some of them are actually Salesforce has a massive team over here. SAP, if you look at the SAP labs in Bangalore right now, a lot of their core SAP cloud work is actually getting developed. That product is getting developed over here. So Pega is another example. Pega's got a great, wonderful GCC in Hyderabad, for example, right? So look at a lot of their Pega products are actually getting developed out of India. So India became not just a destination for IT BPM work. They started really looking at creating product work over here. So the technology firms came in later, so including the likes of Verizon's and in terms of a telecommunications standpoint, and they changed the game with an R&D center, within R&D perspective. Now, if you look at the mix of GCCs, majority of the GCCs are multifunctional, right? They've got, so you look at it, pure IT GCCs are literally gone. Nobody just only IT there, right? They're looking at saying multifunctional thing. So you look at GCCs today will have IT, will have BPO, will have R&D. So 46% of the GCCs today in India are multifunctional, right? They will have a mix of people. They'll have tech, they'll have ops, they'll have IT, right? And all sitting together side by side. And you know what advantage that gives them? Because typically tech and ops are always different to a large degree. But now it gives them the ability to look at it at a complete value stream, tech and ops together. So look at product development, look at tech, look at ops, all sitting together, create one single value stream, and they're able to deliver work, which has erstwhile never been possible before, right? But that is something that India is also becoming an integration from a process perspective, making seamless delivery to a customer, right? So that's become very, very important. So that's the chart on the left. The chart on the right also shows you that they're also moving from single centers to multi-centers, right? And that's what's the reason for that? Same answer, talent, right? Whatever you look at it, think, okay, where can we go get the best talent? Where can we go? So we also know that different cities in India have created niche for themselves, right? So let's take a look at how the India landscape looks like today and how many GCCs are sitting in different places. So I know that Dr. Rajaram spoke about tier 2 cities, right? But frankly speaking, from a GCC standpoint, most of them are very happy to look at the usual suspects, right? The usual suspects, I call them, are these 6 or 7 cities that are always there. It'll always be in Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, Chennai, NCR in general. So I just call them 5 of them. Those 5 have been in the top front of every GCC. Today, any conversation that I have, these are the 5 that is always in the top forefront, right? And even here, traditionally speaking, it has always been Bangalore, right? And why Bangalore? Because of multiple reasons, right? Bangalore today has got 30% of the GCCs are sitting in Bangalore today, right? 34% of the talent over here, right? So when I go around in Bangalore, and currently I'm based in Bangalore right now, and I can tell you about that, is that the depth of talent and the breadth of talent is very high. So if you're setting up multifunctional GCCs, so you're looking for, let's say, cloud engineering, product development, analytics, product enterprise work in terms of, let's say, SAP Pega, for instance, you're able to find different kinds of talent and all in that same place, right? You're also able to find multiple domains and multiple verticals sitting in the same place. Looking at startups over here, Bangalore is housing the vast majority of startups as well. Of course, Bangalore has its challenges from an infrastructure standpoint, right? So today, Bangalore is perceived as crowded, but there are a large number of GCCs already sitting over here in a Bangalore point of view. The fastest growing, however, in terms of the number of GCCs that's growing on from a month-on-month or a quarter-on-quarter basis, we are talking Hyderabad, right? Hyderabad, from a location standpoint, is certainly growing faster from a location point of view, faster than what Bangalore is. Of course, the install base is lesser, the talent base is small, slightly lesser, but in terms of growth, that's certainly picking up. Bangalore has the advantage of being able to attract migratory talent, right? So people are saying, I'm okay to move to Bangalore, right? But from wherever. People come from Delhi, from Pune, from Kolkata, they're able to come to Bangalore, right? Not so much to the remaining cities, but now Hyderabad is able to also attract migratory talent to a large extent, right? The aspects of international schools, for example, availability of colleges, availability of universities and other things like that are able to attract that part over there. So just to give you a landscape of how it is. There are tier 2 cities also, but the tier 2 cities houses only today about 10% or lesser, and there are a large number of them in terms of where we rank. We actually run, I'm happy to send you a report if you like, a tier 2 city report, but we've ranked the top 15 tier 2 cities. And the government is also really pushing hard, right? Like Karnataka, for example, has a Beyond Bangalore program, for instance, right? And there are different cities like a GIFT City program that the government has initiated that is trying to push over there. But what we are seeing today is that the GCCs are waiting for service providers to go create the talent, and then we will walk in, right? That's the way. So they're looking for literally service providers, so the likes of your Infosys, Cognizant, Accenture, to go to these cities, create the talent base, create the in terms of the domain, and create your ecosystem around it where talent becomes available, and then the GCCs move in is probably what I'm hearing actually happening. So the number of GCCs in tier 2 cities currently are limited as compared to the tier 1 cities, right? So just a quick view on that itself. Now, if I look at, okay, so this is something that we've already seen before, so I will probably skip this very fast. Very quickly, right? When I look at GCCs, the spread of work that happens here, these are mainly the areas that we're talking about, right? So fundamentally, ER&D, that's the main calling card. Earlier, it was always IT, right? So IT used to be the name of the game earlier, and then the technology companies created a market for R&D, right? And when I look at engineering R&D, we are talking everything from product development, cloud engineering, analytics, and all of that comes into product development. So wherever you're developing products that directly impact a customer delivery or a consumer delivery goes into ER&D, right? So that's the column that we're talking about. So IT would be something which is more of a CIO organization, not a CTO organization. So CIO organization typically looks at how do I manage the internal IT infrastructure. That's IT, right? Whereas if you're looking at, let's say, software development, software engineering, cloud engineering, product development, enterprise software that impacts a customer, all of that goes into the ER&D side of the world, right? That part, India is now knocked it out of the park, completely knocked it out of the park, right? And there are so many different organizations now. They are pumping in money from a R&D perspective. There are now, if you look at the top 3 universities in India, which is basically IIT Chennai, IIT Madras, IIT Bombay, and IIT Delhi, all of them are getting funding upwards of the 3 million from so the top 50 GCCs are now putting in almost $1 million each in terms of looking at having joint programs with the universities, for example. There are 32,000 startups in India, believe it or not. 32,000 startups in India is what we are tracking today, right? And all of the works that and now the top 50 GCCs today, all of them have some kind of startup collaboration program or a startup innovation program working with them that directly impacts or indirectly impacts the product that goes into a customer, right? And some of the work that gets done over here, absolutely phenomenal, right? If you look at the work that gets done in MBRDI, which is basically Mercedes-Benz Research and Development Center, that's how they're calling it even. Some of their automatic driving system gets developed over here, right? If you look at sometimes we say a gold standard for a GCC is Bosch, right? Some of the Bosch products, like global Bosch products, not Bosch products for India, right? The global Bosch products are developed out of the R&D center over here, right? The GE Healthcare are looking at the lung computer tomography and oncology spaces over here, for example. So some of the work that's get done out of the GCC centers, and I know, right? I have come in from a service provider industry, right? So I've come in from an organization which has developed work for all of these. But the work that gets done out of a GCC is almost, sometimes I feel, both the talent, leadership, innovation, product thinking is certainly to a higher level, right? In terms of what that work there is done, because they are also able to attract that kind of talent, because they are also able to pay that kind of compensation for those resources right now. So very quick check in terms of the vertical intensity with a city lens over here. And frankly, this is data, but this is changing, right? This is slightly older data, but definitely you can see that there are some cities that are higher than the other in certain spaces, right? When I saw this chart for the first time, I disagreed. I actually felt that Chennai had a lot more talent with respect to automotive, healthcare, and so on, which is true. So some of this data is kind of changing. So very quickly, but it is true that some cities have a propensity to have greater depth and talent in certain verticals, and they tend to go there, right? If you look at semiconductor industry, for example, right, majority of them will migrate towards a Chennai or an NCR, right? So they tend to go in there. Now they are exploring other areas like the GIFT City, for instance. That's another area we're looking at. And semiconductors as an industry by itself is started to really take off, right? We have always been talking about BFS sector, telecom sector, automotive sector, and so on. But semiconductor as an industry is really taking away. Same thing with industrial, right? Industrial sector with the advent of IoT, 4.0, for example, a lot of talent is now coming through. So don't always think when you say GCCs, we're always talking about people sitting and developing code, right? Not necessarily the case. There's also R&D work. There's also hardware work. There's also a lot of firmware work that actually happens across all of these cities over here, right? But very quick landscape over here, you will see that BFSI is probably the most popular. It's spread across all of the cities. All of the cities will have it in some capacity or the other. Similarly, life sciences and healthcare, it's now spread across a number of various cities. You will actually have them. Software and technology in general, you're also seeing multiple cities having that in quite a lot of space. The BPO sector seems to be a lot more concentrated around the NCR region as well as the Bombay region, for example. We are having a lot more BPO sector that's popular over here. Right, cool. So that's your landscape, right? Next, we are moving into a term that many of you are familiar with, which is the maturity analysis. And we have a maturity model. How can we not have a maturity model, right? So we do have a maturity model for GCCs. I will walk into that. But any questions on the talent landscape, please do let me know. I'm happy to walk back any of those questions.
Karthik, one maybe a silly question. You showed GCC, MNCs are 150 plus GCC and GCC units. So if you pick an example of, say, Daimler, you're calling Daimler as a MNC or a GCC. Can you give an example there? What is the difference in the matrices in these things, please?
Sure. By the way, I always say, right, there are no silly questions, only silly answers. So any question is welcome, right? No, so all of the ones that what we typically use the term is all of the organizations that we sometimes say organization or headquarters sometimes is the term that we use. And those are global industry organizations, right? So Daimler will be a global industry organization, Airbnb would be one, Siemens will be one, Texas Instruments, all of these are the industry, the organizations as such. We use generic terms to describe them. So industry organizations, headquarters, global organizations is what we call them. When they set up a center in India, which caters to a set of capabilities that the headquarters leverages, that center is called as a GCC, right? It is equally possible that they also, if India is a market for them, that's not what we're talking about. So India may be a market for them, and for the India market, they might have a completely different marketing unit, sales unit, distribution unit, production unit, etc. That's not a GCC. That's not what we're talking as a GCC. I'll take Nokia as an example or Ericsson as an example. For Ericsson, India is a market, a big market, right? They work with Airtels and Vodafones and Geos and so on. That's a completely different unit to the Ericsson GCC, which is creating products for Ericsson itself, right? You take Amazon, for example, right? So AWS and for that matter, Amazon.x, whichever it could be, are both massively present in India as a market, right? However, I am talking about the Amazon GCC, which is creating products for Amazon Global, right? That might be consumed by India also, no problem. That's a different matter altogether, right? So we're not looking at the GCCs, typical majority of the GCCs, and I'll change it later in my presentation. Majority of the GCCs are cost centers, right? And in a cost center, that means that they are actually looked at what we call as transfer pricing, right? So transfer pricing is a very critical concept in a GCC, which basically means that you're having a resource over here, and then obviously we're having a center over here. You're also having to require to pay tax in India, right? And how much of that tax in India is determined is based on what we're calling as a transfer pricing, which basically means the headquarters say, I will attribute to saying, hey, you have so much over here. This is your transfer pricing rate, right? Your transfer pricing rate may be $14 an hour, it could be $16 an hour, it could be $17 an hour, that you determine based on the kind of work you do, and that will determine the amount of tax that you pay. But essentially, the center is created as a cost center. Did that answer the question?
Perfect. Yeah, got it. And here GCC units means that when they do multiple city setups.
That is correct. That is correct. That is correct. Right. So great question. Thank you so much. Right. So if I look at it, for example, a company like an Amazon, for example, we will count that as one GCC, but it has 3 units, for example, or 2 units, for example. Right. Blackline has only 1 unit, which is in Bangalore right now. Carlon has 2 units. Right. There's one in Hyderabad and one in Bangalore. Right. So Carlon is considered as a single GCC in the first one. So if I really look at the pen over here, so Carlon is considered as 1 over here, but 2 over here, right? Because it's got 2 units over here. So the units is the number of physical locations that they've gone into, but as a GCC, they are 1.
Thank you.
Just 1 second, hang on. Sorry, I'm back with you. There was a small interruption. Somebody just knocked on my door to ask me something, so apologies for that. Okay, so now let's look at the maturity model. So like we have not so sophisticated as the CMMI for sure, not so detailed as the CMMI, but there is a GCC maturity model, and this is a Zinnov proprietary maturity model that we use to go do maturity assessments on the GCC itself. So I thought I should include this because this is clearly a language that all of you will 100% understand. I should tell you that it's not a capability maturity model. It's just a maturity model that broadly puts the GCC on the map in terms of where they are in their evolution journey, right? The first right at the left corner is what we call as an outpost, right? An outpost is not a term that we like, but it is sometimes when a GCC comes in for the first time, they're saying, hey, let's just go try it out. Let's go figure out, can we do work over here? And they are really looking for just people, right? So almost like a staff augmentation center, right? They're saying, hey, let's go get some people here. Let's go get some basic talent in here. Let's look at just development work. Let's look at QA work. Let's look at some kind of engineering work being done. And that's it, right? So they're not a great level of leadership, for example. There's not great level of processes. There's not great level of integration. There's not cross-functional stuff, right? It's not so much of them. It is just like, hey, let me get in like say 50 people, for example. It's got certain skill sets, 1 unit, 1 sponsor. There's probably a single sponsor from the headquarters who works with them saying, hey, let me go and try and see whether I can get some work done over here. That kind of a centers are what we call as an outpost center. But very quickly, very, very quickly, these centers realize that, hey, you know what, this is working really well. We can really scale it fast, right? The way to scale it, obviously, is now they start looking at saying, hey, can we do higher order work, right? And the higher order work can be in terms of design and architecture. Once you start doing that, you also start to look at some amount of leadership that comes in here. So you're hiring more of architects, you're hiring some kind of design leaders, you're looking at then more than, let's say, DevOps engineers, you're looking at then try to organize those teams. So as opposed to just people, you have started to organize those teams, and those teams are able to develop modules independently. So there's a degree of independence in the way that the teams are structured. There's a structure, first of all. There's an operating model that gets evolved. They get measured, right? So metrics starts coming in. They start looking at how do I now be able to demonstrate a certain amount of value. So that's a satellite center. But the classic phenomenon of a satellite center is they are still dependent on the headquarters to tell them what to do, right? By the way, a lot of GCCs today are still in that area, right? So a lot of GCCs today are still large, but still satellite centers, which means the team is dictated by and how a headquarters tells them, right? So these are not your staff augmentation tenders. They moved on from a staff augmentation. They're structured teams. There's a structured HR. There is a policy that's defined. Compensation gets defined. Things are very much structured. So you can actually walk into a 500-member GCC. All of them, they have leadership there. They've got HR there. They've got IT there. They've got some amount of employer branding done, and they are doing work. But you will see that they are literally dependent on, or they report into headquarters, or the headquarters tells them what to do, and they develop it over there. That's your, in a way, GCCs who are in your maturity level 2. Right? Then you're looking at maturity level 3, where now you're saying they have matured to a point where you can take ownership over a complete product or a portfolio, and that's why we call it as a portfolio hub. Now these kind of GCCs are a lot more autonomous, right? And by autonomous, I mean by saying that they have product management, they have good amount of, let's say, design and UX skills, they have customer centricity, they've got good amount of architectural disciplines that are actually taking place, they're able to make those decisions, they clearly have engineering strength, right? So they moved on from just being pure engineering houses to becoming portfolio houses, right? That's something that we have. The team is structured. They are able to make those decisions. They're able to drive the roadmap. They're able to then create those metrics. They're able to demonstrate value. A good majority. So if between satellite and portfolio houses 80% of the GCCs today, right, in India. The last one is what we call as a transformation hub. And this is where the actual value happens, right? I'll quickly show you that, and maybe we'll come to that in terms of where the GCCs are located. Transformation is where, in a single word, the line of a GCC gets erased, which means they are not a GCC anymore. They're completely integrated into the organization. Like how you might have a Chicago office or a Dallas office, New York office, you have a Bangalore office, you have a Chennai office, and so on and so forth, right? Teams are working across borders. People report into each other, right? And more so, the centers in India have more than just an execution lens. They are actually having a strategic lens where they can tell the global organizations how to change things, right? How they should go to a customer, how to create revenue streams, for example, right? And these are where we're calling as global roles. I'll show you a few global roles later on, and you'll see the difference between them, right? You are now able to transform the way that your global organization performs. That's in a nutshell is what a transformation hub is. Today, if I look at where the GCCs are and how they are migrating, this is how it looks like. Like the vast majority of 80% of your GCCs are sitting between your satellite and portfolio hubs. There are a few that have made the transition to a transformation hub, right? Some of your technology companies are almost there. So I would still look at something like a Google or a Microsoft or an Adobe in that cusp of being a portfolio or a transformation. I look at something like a Bosch, for example, being a transformation unit, right? But here are the cases where they're mature enough, right? They're having global products being created, the R&D is being done over here, innovation is being done here, global roles are being done, product management is being done, and they're having a transformation impact over here, right? So that's your classic, and you can see how it has evolved, right? If you look at it, many of these GCCs who are on the right side of the picture started off as an outpost, moved into a satellite, moved into a portfolio, and now at a transformation on the cusp of transformation, right? So the transition of that is what you're seeing in the top arrow over there since the last 10 years, for example, right? So now if you look at it, the number of companies who are in the outpost have become much lesser. Organizations have moved on. What we see now happening, if I look at 2024, for instance, the last 3 or 4 discussions that I've been having with GCs, companies who wants to set up a GCC here, they are saying, why do we have to go through this journey? Why can I now start off being a portfolio hub? Why not? Absolutely, you can, right? It's a question of, are you willing to invest in terms of leadership? Are you are you able to move a portfolio here as opposed to going getting people here? Are you able to get product lines in here? Are you able to set up R&D work in here? If you can, absolutely you can. No problem at all. So now the companies are saying, let me leapfrog. Let me get into a portfolio hub straight away, right? Lloyds Bank is a good example, right? They set up GCC in Hyderabad last year, right? But they didn't set it up as an outpost or a satellite center. They've got aspirations. They've set up a big center now. They've got a lot of people coming through. They've got good hiring talent. They've set up the compensation in a way that is able to attract talent as well. That's probably what they're looking for right now, right? So that gives you a view in terms of how organizations are looking at this maturity and moving into that. The conversations that we are having are exactly the same here, right? And they are also getting a jump start, right? At some point later, I'll also show you how work is getting moved from a service provider to a GCC. So sometimes they're also looking to say, hey, can I set up a portfolio center? But I can set it up with a ready workforce that I can move from a service provider directly into a portfolio hub and get it up and running, right? Not necessarily as a bot model, but it could be a transfer model and then get it up and running, right? So that's a way in terms of how this is working. So this tells you the main capabilities that define the difference between a Wave 3 or a portfolio hub and a transformation hub. The fundamental differences are what you see in the right? Having global roles, looking at newer technologies, collaboration, etc., right? So that's a quick snapshot for you. I'll pause again. Any questions on that maturity modeling? Happy to take any questions. I got some examples now. So we're moving into a section where we are talking through some of the capabilities that are existing within a GCC, some examples of work that I can tell you. I'll go through that section faster because I do want to talk about the insourcing, outsourcing kind of a trend that we are seeing. But any questions on the maturity model, given all of you are stalwarts in the maturity model, please do ask. I'll try to explain to the extent that I can.
Karthik, Raja here.
Yes, Raja.
We used to have a JV model many years back, like one Indian service provider working with a GCC, probably a MNC, and they started initially and later kind of moving on to a full-fledged GCC. Is it still applicable, or are they straight away setting up 100% themselves?
Yeah, great question. I'm actually going to be answering that question in the section 4. Which is the differences between setting up, there are multiple models available, right? The one that you're talking about more than a JV is like a bot model, right? What we call as a build, operate, transfer model. So build it within a service provider operates for a period of 3-4 years, transfer it across, and then becomes a GCC in its own place, right? Long ago, we used to have something like an iNautix, for example, which is classic bot model that we used to have, right? In
HLHP.
Exactly, right? Back in the times, but some of those now are still existing where we're looking at trying to create a bot model transfer. It can work. It has its own pluses and minuses, but yes, those models 100% exist even today.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
All right, quickly, I keep talking about global roles, right? And I do want to highlight what I mean by that, because this is and you will hear this word starting now, like how you've heard GCC, you will start hearing the word global role quite a number of times starting from now on, right? Very, very simply speaking, a global role is nothing but somebody who's in India, but actually has a global responsibility. That's it, right? At a very, very fundamental level, which basically means that the people in India are not just looking at managing Indian teams or teams in India, but they are looking to see how can I manage teams that are cutting across both India, let's say somewhere in the Europe, US, and they have teams together. So they're actually playing a global role, so to speak, right? So people in the US have now started to report into the India leaders. People in Japan, Korea, Europe have started reporting into in the India leaders over here, right? And it has been an interesting journey, right? In terms of how these global roles have been created, right? And now we are seeing mushrooming, right? The global roles are now mushrooming. So like for example, we have set up a GCC called Data Axle based in Pune. It's a marketing data analytics GCC, right? And the global CTO sits out of India. Okay, so this is the global CTO who drives the product roadmap for Data Axle, right? A person called Vishal Basan. He's actually based in India today, right? And that is what we are seeing today. Like number of those leaders who determine the products that go to the world are actually sitting over here. And Dipesh is a classic example, right? If I look at Samsung, so he reports into the Samsung CEO. And if you go into that, Samsung GCC here in Bangalore is phenomenal, right? Majority of their products that are there in your, if you have a Samsung phone, in terms of how that operating system is created, how that interface is created, what is the kind of technology that is being used within that particular device, for example, is devised by somebody who's reporting into Dipesh in India, right? As a classic example. Now, those kind of roles have become, and this is really growing, like Vijay Ratnaparke is a classic example. So he's CIO, global CIO, sitting out of India, for example, right? Suresh from a global CTO for Honeywell is sitting out of India, right? So these are the kind of examples that we're actually saying that these are all leaders who are now impacting how the global organization is functioning, right? Now, how did these roles combine? There's almost like a transition that happened over here as well, right? The first wave of leaders that we actually saw were leaders who were already in the organization, working in the headquarters, be it in Europe, UK, or US, and they have already established their credential. They have expressed a desire to come back to India. When they came back to India, they kept that same role, right? They did not change the role. So that's the first wave of leaders, already credentialed. They already have established their reputation. They've already built trust within them. They already had teams in the US reporting into them. They knew exactly how it works. Organization culturally was completely accepted. When they came into India, no problem at all, right? So that was their first wave of leaders. So organizations who already trusted them came back to India. Then came the people, very similar people who had a global exposure. They had worked in the US, they worked in Europe. They knew exactly how all of those global organizations work. They know how sales and marketing operated. They knew how the consumers actually work for, what the centricity was. And therefore, other organizations trusted them to start giving them those kind of global roles, right? In BMC software, for example, somebody like a Manoj Thomas is a classic example of somebody like that, who's got the trust, who came in here and did that work. Now we are seeing the third wave of leaders. These are leaders who have probably not necessarily have had great exposure working outside of India. Predominantly been in India, but got a good exposure either via travel or just with the virtue of working across them. Even they are getting interested with some of the global roles that we're actually having, right? But that's a smaller number that we have. Probably 10% of the overall global roles are probably in that sector. But these are roles that are becoming very significant today. And some of these are now determining how GCCs are getting shaped as well, right? So a quick thought of how it is. Some of you, and I remember having this conversation earlier, asking like, okay, so take me inside a GCC. How are they organized? Do everybody report into the center head over here? And is the center head report into the sponsor? Is that how it actually works, right? Well, many GCCs start that way, which is your locally empowered model. So no matter how many BUs that you have, no matter how it is, everybody reports into what we typically call as a center head, right? And your center head then reports into a global CXO, right? So you have a center head and the center head reports into a global CXO. The global CXO would typically be like a CTO, for example, and that the global CXO becomes a sponsor for the GCC. The center head runs the entire center, responsible for both running operations of the center and the technology products and the product development and the engineering that happens within that particular center. This model is not scalable, typically, right? So what happens is many GCCs start like this, many GCCs operate like this until they are probably 200, 300, 400 people strong, but not beyond that, right? Moment it goes beyond that, and you're saying you don't have only one global CXO, you're also having multifunctional. So you're actually having multiple sponsors, right? So if you start having multiple sponsors, then they start moving into a globally integrated organization. So then in that case, your center head becomes more of somebody who either runs one BU, but report or manages the entire center. So becomes an operational center head while taking responsibility for one BU, for example, right? So that's the kind of a model that they actually start working into, and then that moves into more of a hybrid model, for example, right? So that's the difference in terms of reporting structures that exist within a GCC right now. All right. Now, product management, right? So product management becomes very, very important. Product management becomes something which is, again, like very similar to what we spoke about global roles. Product management has become critical, right? Because one of the main things that has transformed India GCCs from being an execution delivery centric house into more of a globally powerful unit or transformation unit or a portfolio unit, right? The third sector that we were talking about, or the fourth sector that we're talking about, is the ability for them to do product management, right? India was very poor in terms of product management as much as, let's say, 3 years ago or 4 years ago. In the space of the last 3 to 4 years, the product management discipline, specifically everything around product manager, product owners, analysis, business analyst, UX, UA. So these roles that you're seeing over here, or the techno-functional roles that you're seeing here, has really grown strongly, right? And it's not massive. We're still talking in the range of around 200 to 250,000 people, in that range. And these are driven by organizations who have put their R&D capabilities over here, right? And so we are still talking about such roles accounting for anywhere between 12 to 14% in a GCC today. But these are the roles that is changing the archetype of a GCC today, right? The archetype of a GCC today is literally getting changed as a result of some of this, right? So that's probably one thing that I do want to leave with you. I want to give you the example of Carlon as an exemplar GCC or a GCC that has really taken advantage of what a GCC construct or a GCC concept should be. I won't take too long about it. It's one of our customers, and therefore taking the liberty to put it over here. They set up the GCC only about 6.5 years ago, right? But today, they're already 18,000 people strong in India, right? And if the 18,000 people strong in India, that represents almost greater than 60% of their global headcount, right, is in India. And this is a great example. Think about it. 60% of their global headcount is actually in India, right? Now, the benchmark tells us today that if I look at the top 50 GCCs, if I just take technology as an example, typically anywhere between a 35% to 40% of that technology talent is in India today for the top 50 Fortune 500 companies in the world, right? Or if you take the top 50 GCCs in India today, if you take a global footprint over there, and you take the entire technology talent footprint, about 40% of that talent footprint is housed in the GCC in India today, right? Compare that, Carlon is probably on the higher end of the spectrum, which is saying 60% of the global headcount is sitting within India today. And what is good about that is it's a complete multifunctional center, right? So they have got IT, procurement, sales and marketing, finance, legal, and they're also split across business operations, technology, data, digital platforms, data sciences, analytics, AI, all of that is over here, right? And the way they've grown is also in a very structured way, but in a very ambitious way, right? So they've looked at saying, okay, initially they set up as extension of the US team. So they had great sponsorship that coming over there. Then they hired the leadership talent, right? They are able to get the leadership talent that was able to go put the focus towards value creation, so the focus was not just driving efficiency, the focus went towards value creation, right? It went also towards efficiency, but then they also said, let's care for the people, let's have a strong employee value proposition, let's look at cultural alignment. They invested in training, they invested in L&D, they invested in a lot of those center of excellence kind of setups, and that has enabled them to grow rapidly across the place. They also have a great change management program, which also meant because some of these GCCs, right, they're still initial stages, they're still dependent on the headquarters to give them a lot of work, right? And therefore, you need to still evangelize to the headquarters in terms of what all can be done over here, right? Hey, we can do this, we can show you this, we can give them multiple examples. There's a little bit of internal marketing, if you will, that needs to happen for the change management to happen within a GCC. So that also happens to a large degree over here. So let's give good examples. Lots of examples over here. I already had given the examples of Mercedes-Benz running their advanced driver assistance system over here. We've got semiconductor devices over here. We're looking at somebody like a Rapid AI, for example, which does medical imaging, right? So Rapid AI today develops a platform which does medical scanning. It actually will map out your neurosystems and is able to detect the chances of stroke and be in a position to give that to the radiologist or a clinician really fast. And that technology is getting developed over here, right? So numerous examples, and I've got like 10 slides in the appendix that really talks about the kind of cutting edge product development work, R&D work that is run out of GCCs today. Then I can send you some of those examples so they can take a look at them later on. I'll pause again. Any questions on that? Because I know I'm certainly conscious of time and saying, hey, I've got 20 minutes left. I want to cover probably 3 or 4 small themes and at least have 10 minutes open for questions. So do ask any questions. Otherwise, I'll quickly cover a few more slides and then we can have a conversation. Sounds good? Okay, cool. Let's take Raja's question first, right? Raja's question was more around what is the built operating model? How does a bot model or an outsourcing look like? I'll answer that today. But we did a survey, right? We actually did a survey where we said, okay, let's go check in terms of insourcing versus outsourcing. We are all familiar with outsourcing, right? How many companies are looking to insource versus outsource was the question that we had, which is the future of GCCs. Turns out our survey actually tells us that 77% of the organizations today who are all having an outsourced footprint are looking to insource some part of their work, right? I'm not saying all part of the work, some part of the work they're actually looking to bring back inside. So this is a cycle that's going back again, right? Earlier, it was the other way around. It was always said that, if it's not your core competency, go ahead and outsource it to somebody. Focus on your core, go ahead and outsource it to somebody, which is still the case today to a large extent, right? Except that we're saying, if it's your core, now redefine what your core is, right? Because technology has changed what your core used to be, right? If you look at a banking organization as a classic example, you would never look at technology as core 20 years ago, right? Today, technology is at the core of what they do in banking for every single thing that happens over there within a bank, right? Barring none, right? So you can't say that technology is not core anymore, right? So in which case, should we still keep that as outsourced? Or should we still bring that inshore? That's the question that we're actually asking, right? So technology has completely redefined what used to be core, what used to be context, what used to be fundamental in terms of what that core competency was, what is an ancillary system has changed now. So you really have to redefine what that is and then rethink what needs to be brought back inside, what needs to be kept from an outsourcing point of view. So that's probably what we're looking at in terms of what the chart is trying to say is that a lot of the core is getting pulled in. And why should you do it, right? Why do you do it? Actually, the answer is very simple, right? You are able to now define because it's your own organization. Remember, GCC is not some other organization, okay? GCC is not some organization in India, which is somebody else. No, all the GCCs are their own organization with their own culture, their own knowledge, their own people in terms of resources and so on. And therefore, the ability for them to work is much easier. The ability to share data is much easier. The ability to define what a product roadmap should be is much easier for them. And therefore, that actually happens in terms of how that is getting looked at. So some context over there. This is a chart, obviously, coming from a GCC consulting company, we are biased. But if you really look at it, sometimes we go tell organizations that if your considerations across these three pillars of people, quality, and value, if these are your main considerations, your GCCs are probably the ones that has the maximum adherence to each of these. Then comes your bot model, which is, yes, if you feel that the risk is too high to set up your own center, invest a lot of capex into it straight away, and you want to then look at how do you want to look at it and say, if you think capex is an issue, too much of investment is an issue, why don't you look at a bot model, for example, where you can use a service provider to create that capability, right? So you can create that capability within a service provider, and at an appropriate point of time, you can either move it in entirety or move it in phases. That's your classic build, operate, and transfer model. Or if you feel that outsourcing is still the way to go, outsource it, right? Whichever it could be. But that's a quick consideration chart for in terms of how we want to look at it. So I'll quickly summarize to say, hey, the GCC market is just really running. We are projecting to have, every time we put a projection, it's changing. But right now we are saying we'll get to about 1,900 GCCs in the space of the next 2 years. So this year, by end of next year, we are going to be adding another 200 odd GCCs. So we're adding about, almost looking at adding, roughly speaking, right? We're talking about adding about 10 GCCs in a month. So every week there are about a couple of GCCs that are actually getting set up right now, right? So that's the kind of trend that we're looking at. Market size is going to hit 60 billion. Frankly speaking, this market size is just based on transfer pricing. If you really look at the way that we want to look at it, which is taking a financial book of records, this is more likely to be in the range of 100 billion, purely from a book of records point of view. Headcount, we are saying conservatively 2 million. Most likely to be in the range of about 2.2 million is probably where it is, right? That's their market from a GCC point of view. Obviously, aspects of what we're looking at is there will be some impact into tier 2 cities. Global leadership in India will definitely increase. Shared services will start moving into GBS kind of work. a lot more R&D and startup collaboration will increase, not just work on technology and engineering and software engineering. It'll move into semiconductors. It'll look at hardware, firmware coming together, tech and ops coming together, and the maturity of the GCCs will also increase to become transformation hubs, right? So that's probably where we are seeing it. I know I've been speaking too long, but typically I will kind of pause over here and take more questions if that's okay. I have a lot more other slides if you want me to get into, but I'll probably thought this is maybe a good point to stop. I know that we're speaking for too long, but getting some questions in might be the what I'd like to do. So over to you. Did I leave you all speechless?
How does it look like in the AI space and also this electronic space, even the PLI scheme that the government is planning to announce? One of the bottleneck is in terms of certain skill set as well as equipment availability that is as much available in China are needed in India, and it can't be a totally end-to-end setup in India by itself, unlike the other setup. Otherwise, the scalability won't reach is also one aspect of discussion happening. But what is your reading or observation in these lines, the semiconductor as well as the AI space?
Sure. So let me take the first question first and divide that into two parts as well. First is on the AI space, right? AI is already, from a AI and analytics perspective, very mature, right? So there's abundant talent that's available on the AI space. I'm not going to necessarily say that's the same about generative AI and the creation of LLMs, for example, or fine-tuning of LLMs. That's not where I'm getting to. But in terms of the AI, the way that we understand it today, abundant talent, no issue whatsoever across the tier 1 cities. And a lot of the AI work happens over here. So a lot of the AI modeling happens here. A lot of the data sciences work happens here. A lot of the models in terms of how should we do marketing positioning, for example, how do we get that into product lines, for example, no issue whatsoever. Generative AI is slightly different story, right? If you look at the leverage of generative AI today, and I look at not just using generative AI within the products, but using generative AI for developing code, for example, right? Looking at use of copilots for creating code as an instance, for instance, right? That I sense some wariness, and there seems to be still a little bit of a gap between how the US is thinking about it and how India is thinking about it. We ran what we call as CXO forums, right? And CXO forums are because, again, being in the GCC industry, one of the things that we do actively is to create the ecosystem around GCC, right? And so we hold roundtables based on topics of interest. And we do this literally every month, right? We pick up different topics, we go to different cities, we run roundtables. As part of that, we did run roundtables around generative AI. And what we did see was in generative AI, there are some companies that are clearly having a head start with respect to that. But I cannot today say that all GCCs today have started using generative AI as a norm within their organization to go start using as copilots or embedding within product teams and so on. Not yet, right? So I would probably but it's picking up, right? And it's also something that has to be driven from the headquarters, I feel. So it's me, with my opinion, I feel that some of that is getting still developed within the headquarters. It's not yet come into the GCCs. It's the percolation into the GCCs is not so much higher. Semiconductor industry, to be honest with you, I'm not an expert in that area, still understanding it better. So I can't comment very intelligently about availability of machines and so on. I do know, however, that the semiconductor has 3 phases, which is first is on that whole design aspect, then you have your fabrication aspect, then you have your testing, validation, and rollout aspect. India seems to be, and this is just me having attended a couple of sessions, I can't wax eloquent about it. The aspect that India is extremely strong at is on the design side, as well as on the validation and the embedding side, not so much on the fabrication side. That's my understanding.
No, not about only the semiconductor, the electronics industry, and also the ER&D. How does it look like? Yeah, semiconductor, I agree with you. It's new to us. but the electronics industry and ER&D, you had also shown a graph which says ER&D, we have a more larger presence.
Yeah.
Is that one of the very mature space, and how does it, what is in your view?
Definitely, right? So we define ER&D in a very broad spectrum, right? So for us, anything that actually impacts your core product line is your ER&D, right? So like, for example, very simply, if you look at, let's say, an AWS cloud as a product by itself, or if you look at, let's say, a Google Cloud as a product, YouTube as a product, whichever you want to look at it, right? And if that development, actually the research, understanding of what your next feature is going to be, how do you then design that particular product over here? And if that particular work and development actually happens over here, we will still classify that as an ER&D, because that's not your IT. That's typically your ER&D work or your engineering work, software product development work, and so on. Whether that's on the electronic space, whether that's in any of the sectors, there's no issue with respect to a talent point of view. It's definitely growing and growing strongly.
Thank you.
Major, you're on mute, Major.
Karthik,
Major
this
wants
is
to.
yeah. Karthik, this
Yeah.
is SM Bala from Bangalore. It's not a question, but a comment. I've been associated with the engineering R&D outsourcing for close to 30 years now. There is a little bit of difference, particularly in the slide you showed about the preference from a GCC to BOT and outsourcing. In my experience, I find that it's not across board that this preference is existing. The GCC is a concept which is more bought by larger corporations, like Ericsson, Nokia, General Electric, Bosch, and things like that. But there are a lot of small, equivalent of our MSME kind of organizations, which take, core engineering work from India. For example, today I run an organization, a small organization. We are into developing electronic products, and we have the complete control of this development, and our customers are quite happy with the outsourcing model. They are not looking at starting their own center because they themselves are very small organization. Some 20 years back, I think Zinnov used to call this as hands-free outsourcing. Now we used to be, I used to work with Wipro, and we used to be associated with Zinnov for a long time. So that kind of model still is relevant and going on. These organizations treat the outsource partner as almost as a part of their R&D. There is one organization with which we are working for the last 7-8 years. Practically, there is nobody in their R&D, but we are working on an outsource model. They treat us our R&D partner. The reason is that they do not have the muscle power to have their own GCC outside of their country. So while largely you put that preference as a GCC as the most preferred and outsourcing as the least preferred, there are situations, especially with respect to smaller organizations outside India, that prefer and get more benefit out of the outsourcing than starting their own center. I thought I'll share my experience.
Absolutely. So that's why, sir, I have almost prefixed that slide by saying we are biased in that particular slide, right? Therefore we are, right? Had I was sitting on the other side of the table, I would actually say, right? So yes, indeed, that is the case, and by no means are we saying that the service providers today there is no role for service. Absolutely, there is. Right, and I think if you look at, there are 4 times the size of GCCs today with respect to talent right now, right? In terms of
not only talent, it's also there are instances when I was in Wipro that we acquired Ericsson's R&D, we acquired Siemens R&D. Some of their units which they felt was not viable within their GCC, not the entire GCC, but some sections of the GCC which was not viable have been acquired by the service provider. And these people generally try to keep the balance between GCC and the service provider. They don't go to the extreme. So they have a good presence through the GCC as well as through the service provider, and try to keep the balance. And it gives them the ability to hive off, non-performing as per their consideration to service provider. So, the reverse of BOT also happens in some cases.
The reverse of BOT is what we call as a carve out, right? So the term that we use today, which where a service provider.
We used to call it as rebadging.
No, rebadging is different. Rebadging is completely different, right? So rebadging is where, for example, if there are resources that are sitting in a service provider, are actually moving into a GCC or vice versa, but that's a resource movement. We're calling the resource movement as a rebadging unit, right? Rebadge resources, as we sometimes call it. The carve out is if a service provider buys out a GCC, right, entirely. So we take it over. We have seen carve outs happen, but carve outs are very, very very few, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Right, about 4 or 5 carve outs in the last 2-3 years that have actually happened, and majority of that carve outs have been when the GCC, and you rightly called it out, Bala sir, where the GCC has not performed to expectation. Right, there was a certain set of expectations that have happened for whatsoever reason. Right, it could be
correct.
It could be headquarters itself not being able to fund the GCC in its initial years, but the performance of the GCC was so below expectation that they said, okay, what do we do now? And they have created carve-out options where the service provider has taken that over, and they've been able to turn that around. So those stories are 100% there, no doubt about it, right? So yes, so do agree with you that that kind of that also happens in terms of where the industry is today. But if you broadly look at it, right, if you take currently, and it could be a current situation and the cycle may change, right? Cycle always changes. It's been going up and down for the last 20 years, one way or the other. But current swing, the winds of change, if you will, and you look at the annual results of all of the organizations, including an Accenture or a Wipro, Cognizant, LTIMindtree, and so on, they have been either negative or in that range of 1%, 2% growth or lesser, right? That's been
more largely negative.
Largely negative. EPAM has been negative. So,
yes.
So the growth is not happening with a service provider. But if I look at, compare that to, let's say, the talent growth that I'm seeing inside a GCC, that is happening. Right?
That's true.
So therefore, the conclusion I'm drawing from that is that work is moving to India. Talent is growing in India. They are finding jobs today, but those jobs are moving towards a GCC and not necessarily towards a service provider. So that's the conclusion that we are getting to.
I agree. But what I wanted to say is that in some instances, as I said, the smaller organization which tries to leverage the talent in India, the outsourcing or service provider model is also very successful. But as you rightly said, that percentage is very low. Thank you, Karthik. It was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you for your inputs.
Hi, Karthik. This is Prasanna here.
One more last question before Major starts the vote of thanks.
Okay. Can I go ahead with the question? Can you hear
please
me?
go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Karthik. This is Prasanna here. Thank you very much for the information. It looks like there is a lot of opportunity out there in India. So my question is, I want to understand, let's say, in the likes of consulting organization, I am a founder of a small boutique consulting organization. So I've been working for my own organization for the past 1 year. So my question is, where do we, kind of find an opportunity within this GCC, right, for a consulting organization? So what are the opportunities that exist? What are the current problems, that they face where we could go and pitch and help them? And that's an opportunity for us. Yeah. Go ahead.
Across the board, right? So GCCs today are operating like how any other technology firm would operate, right? So they need help in every sense, right? They need help from, let's say, if you look at, let's say, software process improvement, for example, they need help. They need help with respect to agile consulting. How do they set up those teams? How do you look at? They are extremely keen to understand how do we look at productivity as an example. For example, they're all majority of the companies. If you look at GCCs today, they're all 6 years and above, right? So the headquarters has already extracted their 30-35% of efficiency value. If you're purely looking from the lens of efficiency, they've already got that efficiency gain already. They're looking to see, can I get another 10%, right? Can I get an additional 8 to 10%, either via, let's say, from a productivity improvement, driving better operational efficiency, right? Anything through automation, for example, they are looking for consulting support for sure, right? In any of those areas. Talent transformation is a big area, right? Because name of the game is talent, right? So talent transformation absolutely is a great area they want to look at. They want to look at, let's say, leadership level transformation. They want to look at saying, how do I look at restructuring, comp and ben? They want to look at how do I change L&D in terms of how it works? Can we change the way that we're looking at performance, for example? Can we look at employee value proposition, for instance, right? Employer branding is another area. Number of areas that we can actually support them through that. Third, of course, is in terms of, let's say, portfolio transition, right? They have a portfolio today. Now they're looking to see, can I increase portfolio? How do I then create transition frameworks that either moves work from either service providers or from where their headquarters is, and how can we bring that portfolio transition back in here? How can we work with vendor management, right? So vendor management frameworks is another area. So many are there, right? So for consulting firms, lots of opportunities as long as we understand what the problems are and we have a way to solve them. The number of opportunities to go in there.
Thank you so much.
Can I?
Yeah, please go ahead, Major.
Yeah, good evening, Karthik. Nice discussion, I must say. And why I said nice, being basically I'm an electronic engineer, electronic and telecommunication engineer. You talked about semiconductor. In that my complete idea went to semiconductor division at Pune. I'm talking about 68. We were there. Now, of course, the latest one was Dr. Nujunwala and of course Bhaskar Ramurthy. They were developing some chip in the Hindustan teleprinter requirement. It was a nice combination. Instead of only focusing onto the software, only software development or related to software, you covered whole gamut of area, and it was really wonderful information. Everybody liked it, and it's a real good thing that we could get you on and then get the knowledge onto it. Only thing is, I'm worried about the cyber security part of it. Of course, you must have addressed it, but of course now is not the time to address that particular thing. You must have done that, because there is a problem today. As on date, there is a problem. That's what happens, because when we discussed things, when we had worked with Israel, the things are different. Israelis, the security entirely different from the, I'm talking about defense security. But thank you very much, Karthik. It was a real insight and a subject which was, everybody was interested. It was a pin drop silent, and everyone was listening to what is being done. Hey, what is this? How is it going to be affected? Yes, BOT model is there. It will. We need that kind of thing, should we have it. Also, I have addressed this, of course, Rajaram knows about it. I've been insisting with the vice chancellors of the many universities, unless we, skill development is done to our children, and the things will not be meet the global requirement. Thank you very much, Karthik. So kind of you to have really spent time with me.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience and listening to me. I hope it was useful. Would love to reconnect with all of you. I think it was great to meet so many of my friends also over here. I'm going to be pinging and messaging them soon after this session. So wonderful to be here. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Karthik. One question, Mr. Bala or somebody has posted, is the deck shareable?
Yes, so I will, so not all of it, some of it I will change and I'll share the remaining version. Okay. Okay. Yes.
Sure.
Right.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much once again.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karthik.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.